Many years ago, I used to live in this crappy apartment by myself. I had a one bedroom, one bathroom unit on the second floor of the building. During the time of this event, I'd been living there for over a year. So one night, I was by myself, and I had been home for several hours. It was about 9 o'clock at night or so, and I was hanging out in the living room. I remember that I kept hearing the sound of somebody walking down the hallway. Like I said, the apartment was not the nicest, and it was kind of old, so the walls were pretty thin, and you could hear whenever somebody walked down the hallway. But it wasn't a big problem, because the building was usually pretty quiet, and there were maybe 10 or 12 units total on my floor. So it didn't happen very often where people would walk by. But I seemingly heard somebody walk back and forth down the hallway about 10 times in the span of like 5 or 10 minutes. After hearing this person walk by, I got curious as to what was going on. I got up and walked over to my door, and then looked out of the peephole. After looking out for maybe 10 seconds, I heard footsteps. Then I saw a man walk down the hallway right past my door. He was kind of tall, thin, and had sort of long hair, and I didn't recognize him as anybody who lived there, but I figured that he probably did. After walking past my door, he went down the hallway. I kept watching for a little bit, and then I started to walk away. But I heard the footsteps then coming back, like he turned around. So I walked back over to the door and looked out of it again. This time, the man started walking by again, but right as he got even with my door, he suddenly stopped, and then he turned his head and looked directly at my door. It was like he could see me, and I quickly moved back. It was really creepy. The guy started standing there right in front of my door. I did not go back to look. Instead, I went back into the living room. But a short time later, I heard a knocking on my door. I had a bad feeling about it, knowing that it was the strange guy who was walking up and down the hallways. Obviously, I had no clue what he wanted, but I also didn't want to know. So I did not get up and go answer the door, but he continued to knock. He would knock for a few seconds, stop, and then knock again. This went on for several minutes. I got annoyed, and I eventually got up and went to look again. When I did, I saw this guy still standing there on the other side. He started knocking, seemingly louder than before, now pounding on the door with his fists. Then he actually tried opening my door. It was locked, but I moved away again, hoping that he wouldn't be able to somehow get inside. He kept alternating between pounding on the door and trying to open it. After this went on for a while, I heard the sound of someone else's voice in the hallway. I recognized it as my neighbor Jerry, who lived across the hall and to the right. The guy stopped banging on my door, and I heard the two of them talking. Then, all of a sudden, I heard some shouting and what seemed like an altercation. I went over to the door, and this time I opened it. I saw Jerry laying on the ground, and just barely saw the other guy sprinting to the end of the hallway and then leave. I went over to Jerry and asked if he was okay. Jerry said that the guy had punched him in the face and attacked him. I went and called the police, and then Jerry and I waited for them. Jerry was fine, but he said that he had wanted to see what all the racket was about because he heard the guy knocking on someone's door. He went out and questioned the guy, and he said at that point the guy just attacked him. The police looked around, but the guy had left the building. After that, the man did not return. I don't know why he was trying to get into my apartment, or what he was even doing there. I feel bad that Jerry got beat up, but I'm glad that he was okay. The whole thing was very strange. One weekend last summer, a group of girlfriends and I rented an Airbnb for the weekend to celebrate a friend's birthday. It was supposed to be a fun weekend getaway. We found a cozy Airbnb in a secluded part of the mountains. A perfect place in a beautiful area with no neighbors, so we didn't have to worry about making too much noise while partying. The pictures showed a charming cabin with a fireplace and a wraparound porch, surrounded by towering pines. The reviews were mostly positive, except for a few mentions of the host being overly attentive and welcoming. At the time, we shrugged it off, thinking it was more of a good thing than a problem. We arrived on Friday evening, excited and ready to unwind. The host, a middle-aged man named Harold, greeted us warmly. He informed us that we would have the house all to ourselves as he stayed in a smaller guest cabin on the property. As we settled in that first night, everything was fine. We cooked dinner, played games, and just had a good time celebrating the birthday weekend. It wasn't until the second night that things started to get weird. Around 10 p.m., there was a knock on the door. We weren't expecting anyone, and it made us all jump. I opened the door to find Harold standing there, holding a small basket of snacks. He had just wanted to check in on us, seeing if we had any problems with the place, and offered the snacks, which we politely declined. It was strange for him to have visited that late at night, but it was whatever. It was only about an hour later that night, out of the corner of my eye, I thought I noticed a shadow pass by the window outside on the wraparound porch. We went outside cautiously to check the porch, but saw nothing. A little while later, one of my friends said they swore they saw a figure standing outside the same window and looking into the house. By the time we checked it out again, however, there was nobody there. Later that night, around midnight, we were in the living room, trying to shake off the things that we thought we saw and still have a good time. Then, Harold knocked again, this time without any snacks. This time he asked if everybody was okay, saying that he heard some noises. It felt very intrusive, but we began questioning if he had also seen whoever that was earlier moving around the property. We assured him we were fine, and he left to go back to his cabin. The next morning, we decided to check out the surrounding area and do a little exploration. As we were getting ready for the hike, I noticed a strange glint in the sunlight coming from the corner of the room. I walked over and discovered a small camera hidden behind a decorative object. I showed my friends the hidden camera, and we began to search the rest of the place. We found more cameras, one in the living room, another in the bathroom, and yet another hidden in the bedroom. They were all well concealed, but once you knew where to look, they were almost laughably obvious. We quickly put together that the figure we had seen on the porch by the window was probably our host Harold watching us last night, since he also had the cameras set up. We decided to ditch our morning hike and leave immediately before our checkout time. We didn't want to confront Harold because we were creeped out and just wanted to get away from there. We left the keys on the kitchen counter, grabbed our bags, and drove off without notifying Harold. Once we got back into cell service, I quickly opened the Airbnb app and left a review. I warned future guests about the hidden cameras and the creepy visits from the host. It felt important to make sure nobody else would experience what we did. The next day, I reported everything to Airbnb and hoped that Harold would be done hosting forever. This happened just last year. I'm a pretty average guy for the most part. I work a job and I have my own little apartment near the city. One day I was added by a seemingly random girl on Snapchat. This is not something that happens very often. My first thought was actually that it was a bot account probably. Still, I was curious, so I decided to add the account back anyways. Well, within probably 20 minutes of adding it back, the account sent me a snap. It was a woman named Avery, and when I opened the snap, I saw a selfie from a good-looking blonde woman who appeared to be around my age. She said hi. I responded sending one back of myself and saying hi. She then typed in the chat instead of sending back another picture. Avery told me that she didn't know if I knew her or not, but she went to my gym and occasionally saw me there. I would work out every day at usually around the same time, which was right after I got off of work. There were lots of regulars that I would see at the gym, as well as other people who I did not know. A lot of people went there, and it was a pretty large gym. However, I never really talked to anybody there before and wasn't friends with anyone. I thought about if I had seen her before, and I didn't necessarily remember her exactly, but I thought maybe she looked kind of familiar. She also told me that she wanted to talk to me at the gym, but didn't want to bother me. We got to talking, and it seemed like she liked me. She was very nice, and we had a few things in common. I tried to look her up on Instagram, but I couldn't find any results. There were a few accounts that possibly could have been her, but I didn't know her last name. I couldn't really find anything. After talking for 2 days on Snapchat, Avery asked me if I wanted to meet up sometime. I agreed and said yes. Avery said that she worked at a local bar which was downtown in our local city. She said that I should come and meet her after work that night, and said there was a park right across the street from the bar and we could go there. I agreed, and she said that she got off at 9 p.m. I didn't really think at the time that it was strange to hang out in a park at nighttime. Looking back, it was kind of weird, but I drove to the park and got there. When I did, I went into the parking lot and saw that there was just one other car. I didn't know if this was Avery or not because I was a couple of minutes early. I texted her, but did not immediately hear back, so then I just waited. But after 10 minutes, I was wondering what she was doing. Then she finally texted me back, saying that she was in the park and I should join her. It just seemed sketchy. I told her I was in my car, and I never saw her driving there, and now she was just in the park? The only thing that would make sense is if the other car belonged to her. I had a bad feeling though. For a moment, I didn't know what to do, and I thought about just leaving, but I decided to stay. However, about a minute later, I saw somebody get out of the other car that was there. It was a man wearing a hooded jacket. He began walking over in my direction. I did not know what he wanted or what was going on. So the guy walked all the way over to me, and when he was approaching my window, I just took off. I realized then that I had likely been catfished. After leaving, I blocked the account. I was frustrated by the whole thing. But at least I didn't get robbed or anything, or who knows what would have happened. Looking back, it was strange how she didn't give me any real clear information. I could not find a Facebook or Instagram for her, and she only sent me one picture of herself. It honestly seemed real, and I don't know how that was done, but I know for sure that I've been catfished. Hopefully nothing like this happens again. I'm a female, and this is something that happened a while back when I was in high school. It was almost 10 years ago, and this was pretty early on into the school year. So randomly one day, I saw that I got added by somebody new on Snapchat. I looked and it was a guy named Michael something, but I didn't recognize his last name at all, so I did not add him back and I deleted it. Just a few days later, I got added on Snapchat by him again, and once more I deleted him. However, probably just a few days after the second time that I deleted the guy, I realized that he was actually in one of my classes and went to my school. I had never talked to him before, and he sat in the back middle of one of my classes while I sat towards the front and one side. So I would never really notice him much, but I did recognize him. He was a new student in the school, and prior to that class, I had never seen him before. Well, he added me again for a third time. This time, I decided to add him back, just because I knew that he went to my school now and that he was new. I still did not know anything about him other than that. I was surprised though that he kept adding me, even after I would not add him back. Well, finally adding him was something that I would quickly regret. I think it was the very next day, early on in the school day, and he sent me a picture of himself. It was just a basic selfie pretty much with no words. I responded sending one back, but he then sent me like 5 random pictures. We were both in different classes at the time. Some he took of other students, and others were just of the floor and whatever. I opened them up and did not reply because it seemed kind of weird. Later on in the day, we had the class that we were in together. This teacher did not like it when students would be on their phone during class, so I did not go on my phone at all during the class until the very end when we were done and all waiting for the bell to ring. When I did, I saw that there were tons of notifications on Snapchat from this Michael guy. I looked, and he literally sent me at least 20 pictures. I opened them all, quickly going from one to the next. They were all pictures of me that he took from where he was sitting. I found this pretty creepy. After opening them all and not responding, I decided to confront him in person. The bell rang at that point, but I caught up to him outside of the classroom in the hallway. I asked him why he had taken so many pictures of me in class. He just stood there not saying anything. I told him I thought it was really weird, and I was going to tell him not to do it again, but before I could, he just turned and ran away. It was very strange. Michael was now seeming like sort of a creep to me, and I decided to delete him on Snapchat, so I did. A few days went by, and I saw him in class, but didn't talk to him or anything. Then he added me on Snapchat again for a fourth time. This time, I blocked him. I really wanted nothing to do with the guy. Well, that very same day, I left school when it was over. I drove to and from school and had a car during this time. I remember that I left school, and when I was on my way home, I noticed that Michael was driving behind me. I had never noticed this before and was immediately suspicious. When I made it about halfway home, he was still behind me. I didn't think that he lived near me, and I figured that based on his previous behavior, he was possibly following me. When I had made it almost all the way home, he was still there, and after making it less than a mile from my house, I did not want to go any further, so I pulled over to the side of the street. Michael slowed down in his car but did not pull over. He ultimately drove past me and kept going. Then I went home. I didn't really know what to do about this whole deal. Over the next few days, I noticed Michael in class and I completely ignored him. Luckily, he didn't try talking to me or anything. He also did not add me again on Snapchat or try following me home. And probably a week or two after this, I stopped seeing him in class. Eventually, I asked around, and I found out that he apparently changed schools or something. I'm glad that he did. That whole situation is something that I would like to forget. I live by myself in a house a little ways outside of the city. This happened a couple of years ago. One day, I got home from work a little bit later at night. It was some time past 10 o'clock and I was really tired. After getting inside of the house, I pretty much started getting ready for bed right away. I remember that I was in the bathroom across from the hallway from my bedroom when I heard a door downstairs closing. Instantly, I was creeped out when I heard it. I froze and listened to hear anything else, but there was just silence. After that, I left the bathroom and went back downstairs to see what it was. When I got downstairs though, I saw nothing. I noticed that I had left a window partly open and figured that the wind had blown the door shut. This is something that happens from time to time. I felt much better, and then I went over and shut the window and then headed back upstairs. Then I finished getting ready for bed and went into my bedroom. When all the lights were out and I closed my eyes to go to sleep, I heard another noise though. I thought it sounded like somebody walking around downstairs. At first, I told myself that I was being paranoid because of what I had heard earlier. I mean, it was hard to hear something downstairs clearly. It seemed like the noise really could have been anything because it was so far away and I could just barely hear it. Still, it was something, and it continued. I continued listening, and I realized that the sounds were actually getting louder. And then I realized that it sounded like somebody was coming up the stairs. That's when I realized that there was definitely somebody in my house. I started to panic, and I immediately got up out of bed and ran to my bedroom door. I closed it and then locked it. Then I went back over to the opposite side of my room and got my cell phone. I had no idea how, but somebody was inside of my house. As I scrambled to dial 911, I heard the footsteps approaching down the hallway. At that point, I froze. I was unable to speak because I didn't want this person inside the house to hear me. The 911 operator answered the phone, but I didn't say anything. I then heard the person inside of my house reach right outside my door, and then they tried the handle, The door didn't open because of it being locked, and after that the person turned and walked back in the opposite direction. After the footsteps went away, I'm not sure where they went. I was finally able to speak and told the 911 operator what was going on. I stayed in my room with the door locked, and I also stayed on the line with 911. They were really quick to respond, and within probably 3 or 4 minutes, police were at my house. During the time waiting, I didn't really notice hearing any other noises though, and when the police got there and did a thorough search of my house and yard, nobody was found. The door was unlocked though, which I'm 99% sure was not when I went up to bed. So I never found out who broke into my house. I also don't know how or when they got in. I'm guessing it was when I was at work, probably earlier in the night, maybe shortly before I arrived home. That's what makes the most sense in my opinion. My only guess as to how they got in was possibly the window that I had left open a little. It's ironic that seeing the open window made me feel better thinking the wind had blown the door shut, when possibly the intruder entered my house through that very window. Since then though, there have been no problems like it. I'm hoping that it stays that way. I live alone in a smaller house. I've lived here for 5 years now, and I would describe the neighborhood as average. By far the scariest thing to happen took place not too long after I first moved in. I'd been living here for maybe 6 months. One night, I was woken up out of nowhere to a loud banging at my front door. I remember being very confused at first. But once I came to my senses and realized what was going on, I looked at a clock. It was nearly 2 in the morning. I got up out of bed, and the loud pounding was still going on. I had absolutely no idea as to what this could possibly be. After leaving my bedroom and walking over to the front door, the banging suddenly stopped. Still, I went the rest of the way to the front door and I looked out of the window. When I did, I noticed that there was nobody there. I opened up the door and looked around. I saw nothing. Nobody in the street, nobody in my driveway or anything. It was very weird, because whoever had just been here seemed like they really wanted me to open the door. I stayed up for a little while after that, and nothing else happened, so soon I was able to go back to bed. I thought that maybe it was just a mistake or something, but I was still wondering about it all day the next day. Well, the very next night, something else happened. I was woken up in the middle of the night once again. This time, there was no knocking though. I remember hearing the sound of a car horn honking. It was coming from outside somewhere, but I couldn't tell exactly where. It sounded close by though. After it continued for a while, I got out of bed and once again headed to the front of my house. I was getting closer to the sound, and when I got there, I looked out of a window and I saw a car sitting in my driveway. I did not recognize it, but the horn was honking over and over. Obviously, with it being nighttime, I could not tell who was behind the wheel of it. I went to the front door and opened it up. When I did, the car suddenly stopped its honking and drove away really fast. I did not get a look at the license plate or anything. After the car drove away, I was once again left very confused. I figured this to be the same person who had been banging on my door the previous night, but why? I really didn't know. The car did not return that night, and once more I went back to bed. The day after that, I was wondering if I would be woken up in the night again. I thought about going to the police, but ultimately I didn't do it that day. So that night, I was not woken up. I thought things were back to normal. However, as I was leaving for work, I noticed a note taped to my front door. I picked it up and looked at it. It was handwritten, and it said, "I will be back next week." This really creeped me out. Somebody was messing with me for some reason. After that, I did go to the police. I showed them the note and reported everything. They said they would look into it, but said that it might just be a prank. I was really nervous the next week, but nothing happened. I'm glad that nothing happened, but also I'm confused. Since then, though, nothing strange has occurred. I'm not sure if it was just some kind of a sick joke or what, but I'm glad that nothing more ever came of it. This happened a few years ago. During this time, I lived alone. I had a one-bedroom apartment on the third floor of my building. Overall, the apartment complex was pretty nice, and I liked it a lot. However, I only ended up living there for 1 year, which was the term of my lease, and then I moved to a different place. This event took place towards the end of my lease. It was nighttime, and I was home alone. My living room was at the back end of the apartment, with the kitchen at the front. As it was getting late at night, I was planning on going to bed. It was maybe around 11 o'clock or so. So I went over to my living room window. It was a large sliding glass door that opened up to a small balcony that I had. I went to close the blinds like I did every night before bed. When I was doing this, I got a view out to the parking lot, which also happened to be where my car was parked. And when I looked out there, I noticed that there appeared to be a person standing right next to my car. This caught my attention, so I kept looking. I noticed that it was a man, and he appeared to be messing around with my car. I saw him try to open my door, but the car was locked. I could see him then looking in the windows and stuff. I opened up the sliding door to the balcony, and I stepped out onto it. Then I yelled to the man that that was my car. When I did, the man looked up and saw me. I was hoping and also expecting for him to stop what he was doing and run away. After staring right at me for a few moments, I yelled again, asking what he was doing. The guy didn't answer me. In fact, he didn't say anything. He just kept staring at me for a few more seconds. Then he began walking away from my car, but towards my building. I watched the guy walk all the way to where the front doors of the apartment are. Then he went out of my sight. The doors were not in my view, so I didn't know if he had entered the building or not, but it sure seemed like he was going to. This seemed odd to me, because if somebody was trying to break into a car, I wouldn't suspect them to live there. I would have figured it to be somebody just passing by or something. I was just glad that he left my car though, without breaking in or anything. But I was a little bit suspicious with him being in the building. I didn't recognize the guy, but I also didn't know that many people that lived in the building. I went back inside, closed the blinds, and then started getting ready for bed. But probably about 2 minutes later, I heard somebody trying to open the door to my apartment. I walked over to the living room and then looked at the door. It was locked. After things were quiet for a few moments, I walked over and looked through the peephole. I saw the same guy who had been outside at my car. I didn't open the door, but I kept watching him. He stood there by my door for a short time, then he knocked on it. I didn't answer it, of course. Then the man turned and walked away. I was left with many questions. Who was this guy? Why was he at my car? And why was he now at my door? At that point, I just went to bed though. And after that, I only saw the guy one other time. I arrived home from work one afternoon. I parked my car in the parking lot and then went inside to the building. When I did, I got inside the elevator to take me up to my floor. Right after I got inside though, I saw the same man come into view. He was walking down the hallway and headed towards the elevator. The guy was kind of far away, but after he saw me, he started speeding up and almost running to try to catch the elevator before it closed, but it ended up closing before he could reach it. I went up to my floor and quickly went inside. The man didn't come to my door again though or anything. I only lived there for about 2 more months after that, and I never saw that guy again. I live in a quiet neighborhood with my wife. Our community has a group page on Facebook that many residents are in. The page is used to post any news in the community, and anybody can post there. Sometimes people will post things like animals seen in their backyards, or that they're having a yard sale. Other times things like community events are posted there, or possibly pictures of the weather. But every now and then, if suspicious activity or crimes happen, that's where people post about it. However, that's been pretty rare, because our area has always been considered to be pretty safe. In the years that I've been a part of the Facebook group, the craziest crimes I remember was when a police chase cut through the town once, or another time somebody's garage got broken into. Well, one morning I went onto the Facebook page and saw a post that was concerning. It was talking about some possible carjacking attempts and suspicious characters seen near the golf course. When I read the post, it talked of a man who lurked on the side of a certain street next to the woods. The man apparently walked out in front of somebody's car once and tried pulling open the door and then tried breaking the window. The driver was able to get away and called the police. However, when they got there, they did not find the man. Another time, less than a week later, a man was seen in that same general spot, just looking at people standing by the side of the road, and then he went into the woods. He was described as having longer brown hair and a short beard. This was especially concerning to me because our backyard is very large and goes all the way to that very same spot, so technically the guy would have been standing on my property. So the woods that he had come out of was our woods. You see, we have 5 acres, and most of the woods is going directly back behind our house. There's so much of it that we never really go far into them. I rarely go to that part of my property, and the end of the woods is the street that the people were talking about, and right across from that street is a golf course. When I heard about this, I decided to go out into the woods and look around. I hadn't been back there in a while. We have a small path through the first part of the woods, but I would say at least 90% of it is all wildland that I rarely walk through. I went out into the woods and it soon became pretty dense. After wandering around there for like 30 minutes, I hadn't seen or heard anything strange, so I went back inside after that. We were not sure why a man would be hanging out in that area, and we didn't know who it could possibly be either. Well, that very same night, my wife and I were at home. I was in the living room watching TV with my wife, and she got up to get something in the kitchen. It was probably like 10 p.m. or so. Most of our lights were off, and when my wife got into the kitchen, I remember her announcing that something triggered the light in the backyard. We have a motion detecting light in the backyard for the smaller area that's not the woods, which is a grass area and our patio. Both of us assumed it to be an animal, most likely a deer. So I got up and headed into the kitchen to see what it could be. However, we did not see anything for several moments. That is, until we saw a man walking out of the woods and into our yard. I knew right then and there that this had to be the same guy that people had been talking about. We watched from our window as the guy walked around our yard. I thought about opening a window and yelling at him, but I didn't. We moved back as the man walked closer to our house. We didn't really think he could see us because our lights back there were off, but I wasn't sure. That's when I got out my phone and dialed 911. The guy then walked over to our back door and tried opening it. Thankfully, it was locked. He then walked back out into the yard and eventually over to our shed in the corner of the backyard. Then he went inside of it. I told police that the man was hiding inside of our shed. They did not take long to respond and got there just minutes later. They went to the shed and tried to get the man to come out for a while. There were several things in there that he could use as a weapon. After probably almost 20 minutes, eventually they got the guy to come out of the shed. I learned that just a little bit before we had seen him in our backyard, he had tried to carjack somebody else on that same road before taking off into the woods. The police were already called about that incident. That must have been why they got there so fast, and that also must have been why he was trying to get inside of our house and then hid inside of the shed. I'm glad that my wife noticed the light coming on and that we saw him. If not, he maybe could have gotten away with it. Looking back, it makes me wonder if the guy had been living in our woods for a while or something. I'm not sure why he chose that spot, but he had been seen there multiple times. It was very creepy. This is something that happened back when I was a freshman in high school. I'm also a female, and this was about 10 years ago now. So the story begins when I got this friend request from a random guy on Facebook. I looked at his profile and saw that he appeared to be around my age, and we did have a couple of mutual friends. His profile said he went to a different high school, but it was one that was nearby in just the next city over from mine. I accepted the friend request because of this, and I was also slightly curious of how the guy knew about me. For the most part, he looked like a pretty typical kid though. Not long after I accepted his friend request, he sent me a message saying hi. I said hi back to him, and we started having a basic conversation. I don't recall everything said, but the conversation continued into the next day. I remember that's when he asked me if I wanted to hang out with him. Now, I had only just met him, and we went to different schools. He seemed nice to that point from talking, and I almost said yes. But then I ended up saying no at that point, because I just didn't know him well enough yet. He said maybe some other time, and I said yes to that, but not making any official plans. For the rest of that day and into the next, we continued to talk on and off. Well, the next day, later on, after I got home from school, he told me that he was going to come to my house and pick me up. Once more, I did not feel comfortable to hang out with the guy yet. I told him that I would not be able to, but he didn't respond to me for a while. About 20 minutes later or so, he told me to come outside, saying that he was there. I got a bad feeling about it, and also realized now that this guy must be at least 16 years old if he was driving around. I walked over to the front of the house and saw that there was a car parked out on the side of the street. It was a red four-door sedan that was kind of old looking. However, the windows were rather tinted and I could not see inside. I was really surprised that he had driven all the way to my house. At first, I felt kind of bad for him to drive all that way and not hang out with him. We had been talking for a few days, and most likely he wouldn't be a bad guy. So I almost walked outside and got into his car. But my parents were also home, and I would have to tell them where I was going, and I didn't think they would want me to go with this guy. After thinking about it for a minute or two, I decided not to go. When I said maybe we'd hang out another time, I didn't mean just drive to my house. He texted me on Facebook a couple more times, urging me to go outside already. I told him that I had some other place to go though, which wasn't true, but I didn't know what else to say. Eventually, he said okay, and he drove off. After he left though, I got the realization that I never told him my address. It sort of creeped me out that he knew where I lived. I didn't know how he would know this. We did have mutual friends on Facebook, so possibly he knew one of my friends and asked them. Either way, I was much less comfortable even talking with this guy anymore. However, despite that very same night, he continued to send me messages. I remember that this was several hours later, probably 9 or 10 at night. He asked me where I was and what I was doing. I told him that I was just in my room doing homework, which I was. After that, he did not respond right away. I don't remember what assignment I was doing, but I was pretty focused on it. I sat at my desk in the corner of my bedroom. About 20 minutes later though, I heard this car driving down the street slowly outside. My bedroom was at the front end of the house, and I could see out to the street. We also lived in a pretty quiet neighborhood, and at this hour, it was rare for somebody to drive past. So hearing a car driving slowly just got my attention for some reason. I remember lifting up the blinds and glancing out the window. When I did, I saw this car moving very slowly and sort of pulling over to the side of the street, across from our house and a little ways down. That's when I realized this was the same red car with the tinted windows. I looked back to Facebook, but there were still no new messages. He hadn't told me that he was coming over again, and he didn't tell me to come outside either. I was expecting him to tell me again that he was there and to go with him like before, but he didn't. As the car continued to just sit there outside on the side of the street running, I kept an eye on it. After several more minutes, the driver's door opened. I saw a man get out, but it wasn't some 16-year-old kid. It was a grown man, probably like 40. He got out and started walking in the direction of our house. At this point, I quickly got up and ran out of my bedroom. I went towards the living room, and luckily my parents were both still up and in the living room. I didn't have time to tell them the whole story, but I alerted them of the guy walking. My dad got up and went over to the door. I looked through the front window, and by now the man was walking on the side of the street towards our house. My dad went over to the front door and opened it. When he did, the man kept walking farther away down the street in the opposite direction of his car. My dad actually went outside and followed the guy, calling for him to stop. But at that point, the guy took off running. My dad did not run after him and came back inside. That's when I told my parents the whole story of how I thought I was talking to a kid my age, and also how he just showed up without me giving him my address. My parents called the police at that point, and my dad went and stood outside in the front door, seeing if the guy would head back for his car because it was still there. When the police arrived, the man was still nowhere in sight. They spoke with us, and then went out and looked for the man. He had to show up eventually because of his car, and when he did, the police got him. After that, I learned a valuable lesson about Facebook and social media. I was much more careful with who I talked to online for the rest of my high school career. Several years ago, I got this apartment in the city. It was a 1-bedroom, 1-bathroom place. I lived on the second floor and towards the end of the hallway. When I moved in, I never really saw any of the neighbors in the building, and it was mostly quiet. Well, one day after living there for about a month, I got a friend request on Facebook from a seemingly random guy. I did not recognize him or know who he was, and we did not have any mutual friends, so I declined his friend request. The next day, he sent me another friend request, this time with a message telling me that he was my next door neighbor. I accepted the request this time, not knowing who he was. I told him that I didn't know that and I had never seen him. He said something like that was fine. So I remember that after that, I was a little bit confused as to how he had found me, because I had literally never seen this guy at all, and I didn't know how he would know my name and find me on Facebook. But overall, I didn't really give that much thought to it. As the next few weeks went by, I never saw the guy out in the hallways or anything, but he occasionally would message me on Facebook. He would randomly ask me what I was doing, or he would ask me how my job was, things like that. At first, I thought he was just a nice or friendly guy, but eventually it seemed a little weird. I think it was just because of how random the times when he would message me were, and his replies were also a little bit strange, and he would ask me questions like he had known me for years, and mention things that I didn't know how he knew. Like one time, I went home to my parents for the weekend. Later on when I was back, he asked me if I had gone to my parents. I really didn't know how he knew that. He told me that he just guessed, but it seemed weird. One night though, things took a really crazy turn. It was really late and I was just going to bed. At probably 11 p.m., I saw that he sent me a message. It said, "What are you doing?" I was tired and did not bother to open it or respond. Instead, I just got ready for bed and then went to sleep. But as I was trying to fall asleep, I heard my phone vibrating several more times from notifications. I got curious and I looked at it to see several more messages from my neighbor. He was saying things like, "I know you're home," and "I need you to answer me now." He always seemed kinda strange, but never texted like this before. I responded asking if he was okay and what was going on. He told me that he wanted to come over, and I said that I was really tired and I was going to sleep. I asked him if anything was wrong, and he said no, he just wanted to come over. I told him no, I was busy, and then I put my phone down. But he kept sending me more and more messages. I turned my notifications off, knowing that he was just going to keep sending me stuff. Then I ignored it and I went to bed. However, not long after this, I woke up to the sound of banging on my door. It was my neighbor, and I saw on Facebook that he sent me at least 20 more messages demanding to be let in. He was loudly knocking on the door and trying to open it, I went over to the door and yelled from the other side that if he didn't leave, I was going to call the cops. He still didn't leave though. Instead, he just demanded that I let him in. So I called 911 and told them what was happening. The man stayed at my door and continued knocking and asking me to let him in. I obviously did not. When the police arrived, he was still there. I heard him arguing with police, and eventually he tried fighting one of the cops and got arrested. I'm pretty sure that the guy was crazy or else on drugs. I don't know why he acted like that, but I'm glad that I didn't open the door for him or anything. I don't go on Facebook that much, but I do go on from time to time, and last year something really strange happened. One day I went on Facebook for the first time in probably a couple of weeks. When I did, I saw that I had one new friend request and clicked on it to see who it was. The person appeared to have the same exact profile as me. They had the same name as me and the same profile picture. It was like they were pretending to be me. I clicked on the profile, assuming it to probably be a bot, but this was really strange. There was not a whole lot that I could see right away on the page, so I accepted the friend request to see more. After I did, I saw that this person pretending to be me had posted several of the same pictures that I had on my page, but this profile only had one friend, which was now me. I was still thinking that it was a bot of some sort, and this was really weird. I sent a message to the person saying, "What's the meaning of this?" They responded back rather quickly, saying exactly what I had sent to them. "What's the meaning of this?" I asked who it was, and they wrote back the same thing, just imitating what I said. It was really weird. I figured at this point that it was probably some kind of a prank. I got off of Facebook and texted a few of my friends about it. However, when I did, none of my friends admitted to it and didn't seem to know what was going on. I know my friends pretty well, and they all seemed genuinely confused. The next day, I was really curious as to who it was, so I went back on and sent another message to the page. This time, hoping that it was a joke somebody was playing on me for some reason, I said, "This is a funny joke, but seriously, who are you?" The page responded just saying, "This is not a joke." They finally said something other than just what I had said to them. I asked them to stop pretending to be me, saying that it was really weird. They responded saying, "Okay, I will just take your account then." I didn't know what they meant by this, but I was annoyed and I blocked the page right then and there. I thought that was that. The next day, however, I got a Facebook notification randomly saying that several people had liked my photo. I hadn't posted anything lately, so I went on to see. That's when I realized that my account had been hacked. There was a picture posted to my account. It was my profile picture, but put through several filters, and it looked really weird. Whoever was behind this said they would hack my account, and they did. I really couldn't believe it. I quickly deleted the post and then changed my password. I hadn't told my previous password to anyone, so I don't know how they would have even known it. After that, I didn't go on Facebook for a long time, and also strangely, the person never hacked into my account again or sent me another friend request or message. I still don't know who did that or why. It's very mysterious.